I'm glad you're viewing this devotion today. Please feel free to share it. The past 2 weeks I've talked about the attributes from CTE's logo, the first being integrity and the second quality. This week I'll be talking about the third one, which is service. The idea of service has changed significantly in our culture over the years. I know that most of you are too young to have experienced these things, but I clearly remember my dad and mom pulling into a gas station, and an attendant would come out to the car, fill the tank, wash the windshield, check the oil, ask if there's anything else he could do for us, and then he would take care of the payment, all while we were sitting in the car. That's called full service, by the way. I remember many times as a young child, our family doctor would come to the house in the evening or the middle of the night because unfortunately I suffered from chronic ear infections, and he would come and try to help me out. I remember going to the grocery store with my mom, and we'd get our groceries, go to the checkout. A person at the checkout would bag all of the groceries, and that person would carry all the groceries out to the car. And I also remember that when we built onto the house that I grew up in, there was a neighbor, a next door neighbor, that worked beside my dad to help get the addition built, not expecting anything in return. To many people, these examples of service seem old-fashioned and unnecessary in our culture today. So much of our interaction with businesses has been reduced to self-service. When you call businesses for assistance these days with an issue, it's very unlikely that you would even get to talk to a live person. You know, CTE was founded on providing personalized service to our customers. The past 10 years, I have witnessed firsthand, time after time, service to our customers that went well above and beyond the norms of our business world today. At the risk of sounding old, I would say that CTE provides good old-fashioned service, and our customers respond well to it. CTE has enjoyed significant growth every year since I started 10 years ago. And I think a factor in this growth has been the service that CTE provides day in and day out. Service, or serving, is nothing new. Those words are used all throughout the Bible. God gives us His wisdom on what it means to serve or provide a service well. Today I'm going to walk us through an account of Daniel's life of serving the king of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon at that time, and he attacked Jerusalem and defeated the king of Judah. In that defeat, Nebuchadnezzar had selected young men from the royal family and nobility of Judah to be forced into his service in Babylon. Among those young men was a man named Daniel. Daniel was taken from his family and his home, leaving a very good lifestyle, to live under a non-God-fearing king. He was forced to learn the language and the literature of Babylon and was trained for 3 years. Stop and try to put yourself in Daniel's place for a minute. How would you react to the situation Daniel found himself in? Would you be resentful? Maybe you'd become depressed, bitter, hateful. That would be understandable, right? But that's not what Daniel did, as we see in the book of Daniel chapter 1, verses 6 through 21. And I'm going to read that from the New International Version. It goes, "Among those who were chosen were some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, "I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed this, and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. The first thing we want to learn from this passage was that Daniel chose to remain true to God and serve God first, even though he was forced into service of a hostile king in a foreign land. He didn't want to break the Jewish law by eating foods that were not within his law. The second thing we learn is that Daniel was respectful and demonstrated a desire to serve Nebuchadnezzar well in spite of his circumstances. There are a couple of things we need to notice in this passage. And if we look back at verses 8 through 16, Daniel asked permission to eat only foods that fell in line with his beliefs in his God. He was up front with those over him and took steps not to cause his overseer any problems with the king. Daniel was careful to follow his beliefs in such a way that it reflected well on his God. And then if you look at verses 17 through 21, we learn that Daniel lived the next 3 years in basically what was an apprenticeship to become a servant to the king. Daniel worked diligently to learn all that was put before him. He just didn't get by. He excelled. He excelled in his learning, and he greatly increased his knowledge and understanding of the Babylonian kingdom. He served his God well, and God blessed him, and he served Nebuchadnezzar well. As we see in verse 20, he found Daniel to be 10 times better than all the magicians and the enchanters in his whole kingdom. We know that Daniel served well because in verse 21 we're told that Daniel served all the days of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. The way Daniel served was not dictated by his circumstances. It was determined by Daniel's choices that he made in the midst of his circumstances. Serving well may not be the easiest or the most efficient way for you to perform your expected tasks, but it's God's way. There are 2 passages that make this very clear. The first one being Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 through 13, and that reads, "And now Israel, What does the Lord your God ask of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good. In Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40, it says, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. The identical phrase of the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul in these passages I just read are used with the words serve and love. When you love God and others, you will serve God and others well. As Christians, we have choices to make every day with regards to who we serve and how we serve. Some of those choices might be, am I going to allow my circumstances today to change the way I serve God today? Another one might be, am I going to allow the situations of the world, COVID-19, riots, hatred, and the such, to impact the way I serve others? Or am I going to allow what is culturally prominent with regards to what an acceptable level of service is to dictate the way I serve? You know, I'm very thankful to be able to say that CTE is a company that has chosen to serve well by striving to serve our customers well, by striving to serve in our community well, and by striving to serve our employees well. How would you rate yourself with the way you are serving with respect to these things? God, your job, your coworkers, your family, your friends, and the community you live in. How would you rate yourself with the way you're serving in those areas? I hope you've gained some insight from God's word on serving today. May God bless you and keep you safe.